Okay, I think it's working. Okay. So when I read through this, I mean, I read a lot of magazine pieces and just in general kind of read quite a bit. And to me, this article followed the trope of we're going to introduce something and maybe give you the idea that there's something about it that you need to be concerned about, maybe fearful of.
Yep.
And then we're going to put this proposition out there and say, is this necessary? Is this good?
Yep.
And then we're going to slowly walk back to kind of a status quo of it's really how you use it, it's really what you do with it, and that sort of thing. So it kind of, for me, threw that out on the branch of, is this even good? Is it legal? Is it right that people are doing this to employees? And then it walked the idea back to, it's data. Big data is a big deal. Everyone's using big data. And this is how these guys are using it. And so to me, it kind of settled into this nice realm of, it's not as bad as we initially said. We kind of sensationalized it a little bit. It's really just information and what you do with it, which is a fine approach. But I noticed throughout the article, there were several points that I thought some of the stuff that we've generated and we've even put together from, you and the other doc and over the years that directly rebutted some of the fear stuff that I saw in the article.
Sure.
So I wanted to get your take on the article first off, and then to kind of maybe hit some of those points. So not to come out in a defensive stance. I don't think that's what we're shooting for, but to be able to say, this is what Time put together through their sources. If there's uncertainty on Time's part, maybe it's because they didn't interview the right people or they didn't get the right, data. But we can answer some of these questions because I feel like looking through some of the things they raised as potential red flags, we have responded in other media to some of that stuff. So
that's exactly right. Yeah, reading through the article, it's the discussion. It is the discussion between hiring organizations and candidates, and this distribution in the war for talent on both sides of the hiring equation. You've got, and Mark Allen just mentioned in the town hall meeting about the skills gap. And the requirements, the qualifications, and the education creep that's going on, as we all know. I mean, it's increasingly competitive because education is now becoming not only the most accessible it's ever been, and the content and quality of education is better than it's ever been before, but it's also becoming inaccessible to a certain segment. And so you've got this incredible gap that we're trying to we're not trying to solve the gap necessarily, but we're trying to address it in a way that's responsible not only for candidates, but for hiring organizations as well. Because just because it's competitive in the war for talent and for qualified talent, and just because it's competitive in the job market where you have 1,000 applicants for 2 seats, as we've heard anecdotally from our hiring organizations, just because there's this kind of inequitable distribution of resources on both sides of the equation doesn't mean that we can't address that responsibly.
Right.
And I think assessments are one way to do that.
Right. So, one of the points that they made in the article, what you just said, not everyone having access to, for example, an assessment provider or an assessment in the flesh, I guess. Yeah. I get why that stuff would come up in conversation with individuals who maybe don't know exactly what assessments do, but there seem to be, we have our own vernacular here. We don't say test, we say assessment, and they call them tests kind of throughout. And it puts you in that framework of it's pass-fail.
Exactly.
It puts you in that framework of I may not have the skills requisite to do this job, and they're going to suss me out and judge me some way that's unfair to me or unfair to society as a whole because it's just not right that people are looking for these sorts of things. Don't they want to know who I am as a person? And my spin on that, and I'm sure you can even talk at length about this, was that it's not predictive in the sense that, well, that's not what I write down. Well, they made the analysis toward the end of the article about comparing it to Google's auto suggest feature. And so it's like that's a predictive thing based on millions and millions and millions of users who have entered information into their algorithm, right? And so ours is not so much predictive in my vernacular as it is analytical. It's like it's not telling you can't do X. It's telling you traditionally throughout the history of your life, your experiences, beliefs, mores, whatever. This is who you are now.
Exactly.
So to me, it felt like it was kind of almost playing on the wrong field because it was going down that line of people reacting negatively to does my education support me being able to pass a test versus who you are
Exactly.
and what you're going to fit into naturally because of who you are.
That is the challenge that assessment developers have, is even though we just mentioned, 2 minutes ago, talking about the skills gap, what we're really looking at is the fit. Okay, in the face of this skills gap, in the face of the fact that jobs have to be filled, they have to be filled by someone, whether they are, passing and failing a certain skills requisite, either way. It's the approach that they're going to take to the job that has been proven time and time again to be the most predictive of job success. Is that, I think the article mentioned this X factor.
Yeah.
It's the intangibles. And yes, you have to have the hardware. Yes, you have to have the cognitive skill. Yes, you have to have the ability to go. But it's really that intangible quality that is, that we think is the most predictive of overall success. So the approach someone will take to various situations, if their natural tendency is to adopt one approach to situations that are common to a particular role, and a different type of approach or different aspects of that approach have been proven to be more effective by top performers, then assessments can point out those potential development opportunities to the hiring manager so that they can facilitate the candidate's success from day one.
Right.
And that's what assessments can bring to the table. And labeling as a test, an exam, even internally, we've heard the term exam. It's just a challenge for assessment companies to not be labeled as a pass, fail, or a grade. But in that same vein, we're giving job match percent. We're giving a score of sorts. And so moving into the future, we absolutely are pursuing the possibilities that someone's intangible approach to the job is going to be better reported and better assessed and more efficiently in a shorter amount of time. That is our charge.
Right. What did you think of the term XQ? I mean,
I
think they coined it more or less. I think they're trying to get ahead of it a little bit.
I haven't seen that. I know. Yeah.
I don't mind it as much as long as it's factual and doesn't skew in some negative way. But they kind of built it on IQ, EQ, and then the unknown. So I get what they did. But I didn't know if you had like a response to how they pieced that together. If that works for you individually, and also does it work for the industry, or do you think it maybe could work against in some way?
I think it actually fits pretty well.
Yeah.
I like consistency. I like to have this orderly and consistent evolution. We can't, and just Mark Allen just mentioned that we're not evolving for the sake of evolving the industry. We're evolving to customers' needs.
Right.
And there are certain qualities, certain abilities, certain information that candidates bring to the table as part of the hiring process that interviewers, hiring managers, organizations are wanting to get their hands on. But it's very difficult to do in an hour interview or even 30 minutes. Think of the sheer volume of applicants for some positions. And so there's screening tools, there are different types of other information measures that support the resume and interview. But there's all kinds of information that can be gleaned about the candidate outside of that structured 1 hour interview.
Right.
And so we're thinking, from an assessment developer standpoint, wouldn't a candidate want the organization to have the most information that they can and the most opportunity to showcase themselves? But we understand that the rub is that the candidate can't package assessment results to give the impression that they may want to give.
Right.
Like they could on their resume or they could during the interview conversation. But this is exactly what companies want, is this unfiltered, candid information that is not packaged to fit a candidate's carefully cultivated personal brand.
Right. That stood out to me so much in the one story. I forget the woman's name. I had it written down. The one lady who was a single mother, and she was trying, Kelly Ditson in the article, she was a single mother trying to become an ultrasound technician. And she complained about the length of the test, which is something we're even addressing internally with the product development phase. But she believed personal interviews would be better. She even asks, wouldn't a personal interview be a better assessor of my personality than this test? And we know internally, because we've cobbled together 100 little documents that speak of the science of our tests and the reliability and all this stuff. But that to me speaks to the disconnect between, maybe it's a marketing issue even, between how assessments are presented and how the populace at large conceives of them.
Yes.
Because not only are they thinking it's pass-fail, they're thinking, well, how are they possibly going to learn anything about me just by looking at these numbers on the page? In your opinion, is that strict disconnect? Is it an education thing? Is it partly fear-based because they're afraid that maybe the assessment will reveal something about them they don't want revealed? I mean, there's a whole lot in there to unpack, but I mean, in your opinion, or your expert opinion, is that just an education thing maybe that we need to overcome through better marketing, or is that just human nature to be like, oh, what do they know?
Yeah.
It's almost like a fear response, like, what are they telling them about me?
Like an insecurity.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
It's a vulnerability
Right.
on the level that you're vulnerable to begin with as a candidate.
Mm-hmm.
You're putting yourself out there, your professional experience, your education, to be evaluated. At its core, the hiring process is an evaluative process.
Yeah.
And to the degree to which you can bring like I mentioned just now, a carefully cultivated package of presentation of yourself. However, assessments get it to that core, again, unfiltered piece of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the vulnerability is coming from. And that sense of being evaluated and judged,
Yeah.
which I think is, to your point, a human nature issue. And so we're working very hard. I know Wiley at Large, as well as Profiles International, for our selection assessment development. We're working to not only address some of those concerns, but to add value to the product in addressing those very concerns. Whereas our value chain obviously ends with the hiring manager and the hiring organization. Right. We have felt like for the past couple of years or so that one of our focus for product development is to create hiring assessments that positively reflect the company's brand. By increasing the efficiency in assessment measures that reflects the applicant's time, it respects their time that they're taking. To the applicant's point, their applicants are filling out more applications than ever before. It's taking more time. And so conveying that sense of respecting their time while maintaining the appropriate level of measurement accuracy. Right. Obviously, that's just as paramount. So assessments are one of the first times that candidates work with the organization. So why not make the assessment experience part of a great first impression to the candidate? It's all part of the organization's brand right there off the bat, with the exception of obviously the website and the resume uploading interface, and then there's the assessment. And it's one of the first times that the applicant has a chance to work with the organization. And so to some of the applicant resume application process challenges, wouldn't the applicant want to look like a team player? Again, one of their first assignments is to apply for this job. So when they want to look like a team player, want the chance to shine, and yet you look at every job market board, all of the LinkedIn boards, the different domain and industry specific job applicant boards, there's this groundswell underneath the surface of, oh, this company is making me take this assessment all over again, and I want nothing to do with that company that asked me to take a 200-item test. Right. And anecdotally, even in the article, they talk about taking hundreds of items. Yeah. You know, and it does seem very, I mean, we package it as comprehensive. Right. The applicant packages it as tedious, and the perception is as unneeded. Right. So their perception also was in the article talking about the assessments and algorithms that score these measures being highly unpersonal and detached. I think that's another challenge in that kind of human nature. You're assessing who I am, and yet you're using an algorithm to do it. Right.
Ironically, I thought it was hysterical that the engineers, I forget the name of the engineers at Google were the ones who said, we don't want to be judged by this algorithm. I would have thought if any group of people on the planet would have thought, wow, there's value in this. Engineers would have said, oh yeah, absolutely, that makes all the sense in the world. But when you get down to that human level, education, put a pin in it for a second, experience, put a pin in it for a second. Here's a group of however many engineers going, wait a minute. I don't want that. And it just struck me as so odd. I don't know if they included it in the article for that reason, but it struck me as really odd that engineers would be the ones going, oh, that's voodoo. We don't want that.
Right? I think it does absolutely an example of some great irony in there. And even think about, okay, we're hiring right here in our own research and product development department. Mm-hmm. We're hiring the folks that are going to be producing the assessments by what? Administering the assessment.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's wonderful too, especially the more technological and the knowledge services, the back office folks, us. You know,
I don't know your experience with marketing. Obviously, we all have varying levels of experience in the marketing wing, but I feel like there's work to be done in explaining to not just HR managers, because I think on one level they get it. They get that it's, you know, scientific and algorithmic, and that there's a math and a science to all of it that works out in their favor. And I think there's also maybe a bit of a disconnect with them, where not that they're, you know, Nazis or anything crazy like that, but they're like, it's not my problem if it's unpleasant. It's my problem to make sure the company gets the best hire. So not that they're callous, but, you know, it's like being a parent. You know, do you want to punish your kid? No, but there's something you need to learn and they need to understand, and there's a process. But I think there's work to be done on the marketing end from explaining maybe to assessment takers that it's not against you. It's not trying to, you know, air your dirty laundry per se. And even if you were able to fool the system, game the system, maybe you found an assessment loophole that you were able to navigate, which I don't know how viable a loophole is. Even if you were able to find a loophole, even if you were able to overcome a bad, not that there's a bad assessment, even if you were able to overcome something you conceive as a bad assessment report with your personality or something else winning about you, that doesn't mean you're going to like the job. That doesn't mean you're going to excel at the job. That doesn't mean they're going to keep you around 6 months later if you're not able to catch up, not able to produce, not able to work with the culture. Do you think it's necessary for us as an industry, maybe even as WLS or Wiley, to get ahead of that in some way, to be able to explain to people on the ground, like, this is not your enemy? As a matter of fact, you may get a result from this assessment that points you in a different career path that's more fulfilling for you.
It's a two-way street almost.
Exactly. I think that absolutely will be. That is one of our biggest responsibilities moving forward. Is we are in the business. If you look at the bottom line, we're in the business of convincing client organizations that we can lead. The implementation of employment assessments will lead to positive outcomes, reduce turnover, increase tenure, etc.
Right.
But one important part of that is if they're getting feedback from, again, we were talking about the implementation of these assessments as supporting the company's brand. They're getting feedback right in the interviews. That assessment was tough. That was just so rough. And it took me forever. And they're getting negative feedback. Well, then what does that say about the assessment vendor? What does that say about who they have, the client organizations have contracted, for lack of a better term, to provide their assessments? To get to that, and yet they're giving the company a bad name on the end product of it.
True. Sorry, go ahead. I don't know where we were exactly.
Not at all.
We're
Looks
good.
like we're going.
I think we're
okay.
Good. I hope this thing's recording. If it's not, we're screwed.
No, it's all right. I think you're good because it's counting up still.
Yeah.
The perception. I mean, back to our. The algorithms are impersonal, and and because they're impersonal, and because a lot of, I say end user, but at the candidate level, and even our points of contact at our client organizations, because they're not easy to understand, then they're scary, and then they must be dangerous.
Right.
Despite all of our commentary and technical documentation and training around that. So for that reason, to reduce the perception and reduce the barrier to what not only our assessment providing to our client organizations, but to candidates who are willing, able, and willing, and happily willing to be able to take them, is to supplement, is to convey the what? Just the message that these assessments, at least provided by Wiley, WLS, Profiles International, is meant to supplement and enhance the high-touch interview, not replace it.
Right.
We are not serving as a replacement for again, the very high touch, the very involved personal process. I think the gold standard for the responsible implementation of assessments for candidate selection moving into the future is going to be one part of an entire process which assessment results are conservatively, they're fairly, and they're accurately interpreted.
Right.
And by hiring managers. And the way we can ensure that is to build what Profile has already built, a very successful and long-standing entire process of consultation, training, support materials, technical materials, all the support from here at headquarters, obviously, that we can provide. I think if we can improve upon that, that's going to be absolutely our gold standard moving forward. Yeah. And I think Wiley as a whole will want to get out in front.
Right. I'm going to use the word demonized, but it's a little strong, but I don't know what's right below demonized. But there was a section toward the end, I think it was the last quarter of the article, where they held out, the blame was falling squarely on the assessment, for example.
Yes.
And I wrote in my notes at the time, I said, well, this is kind of a red herring argument because ultimately it's still going to reside in a human being's hands. We generate reports that we give to a hiring manager or HR professional. And yes, we recommend the results be taken very seriously because they're based on solid science, a lot of history, and a lot of other things that I don't even fully understand. But if that person still feels that person could work out, it seemed little like a red herring kind of argument to say, well, the assessment did me in.
Right.
Because it still rests in the hands of a human being who might decide to throw them to the wind. Now, we don't think that's wise. And I would probably say most assessment companies would agree that's not wise. But it just seemed a little bit, the demonization, I guess, of the test, as they called it, was a little unfounded in my opinion because I'm like, the human being at the end of the chain could still disregard it. They could still say, well, I see something in you that maybe, whatever. But it just felt a little unbalanced, I suppose, because they were saying, well it made it seem like, hiring managers, HR pros all across the country were going, well, I can't hire you because Profile said, you were not fit. Right. And while that's probably true in a lot of cases, it just seemed a little heavy-handed and unfair because, it's not like there's a giant machine somewhere spitting people out into a pile of unusable toy parts.
Right.
It was just a little heavy, I thought. But
I agree. It felt generalized. It was generalizing. It was stereotyping and generalizing. They used the green, yellow, red analogy. I think any of the reputable and responsible assessment development companies that were mentioned in the article, as well as obviously Profiles and WLS, would never give, hire this person or not.
Right.
That on many different fronts. And because of everything, kind of just summing up everything we just discussed about the vulnerability, the difficult nature of the assessment process and how there needs to be better training and education around that. The human nature factor of I can't game this, I can't package this.
Right.
All of those different factors kind of end up in this one place, and that is, the assessment did me in because that's the one thing it's easiest to blame because they don't have control over it.
Right.
And trying to look into the nature. I never get angry. Well, of course I do. Well, the questions are never as they seem. Of course they're trying to measure all kinds of things, but trying to overthink it and second guess it will absolutely lead to the detriment of the candidate.
Right.
Overthinking it. The absolute best practice in completing these assessments to be able to get hired is to be honest, be forthright, just be yourself. Don't take forever and ever. Just don't overthink it. Ruminate on everything. Just be yourself because you have to be comfortable with yourself and who you are and thinking that you're a good fit for this job. And I don't think any responsible assessment development company or assessment company would recommend otherwise. Yeah. And so to have that in the same article was a little disconcerting to show that there are companies out there, and there have been, irresponsible practices regarding go, no-go decisions where they lay it out on the report, green, yellow, red, hire, caution, don't hire.
Right.
We would never do that, and I don't think the other companies mentioned the article would either. So that's a little bit of journalism, I think, going on, for sure, to your point.
If you read, I haven't read Time regularly in years, but I do read a lot of newspaper articles and online journalistic pieces, and they all seem to want to get the attention of a sensational sort of headline.
Right.
But then if you read through the articles at any depth, they almost always walk it back to, well, it's not. It's kind of like the TV and heavy metal argument from the 80s. Is too much TV bad? Probably. But TV itself isn't wicked, and music itself isn't wicked. Now, if you do nothing but watch TV, you're going to be a potato. And you do nothing but listen to heavy metal, you might have anger issues. But it's the medium, and to me, the test is producing content. It's the assessment is producing content. The content itself isn't good, bad, or other. It's just true. And if you decide that it's ratted you out, well, then of course you have a negative opinion. If you decide that it helped you get that job, then that's the best thing in the world. But the article, did the journalism thing of look at my headline, and then it slowly walked it back to there's some people who say this, or some people who say this, but the companies love it, and the only people who seem to have a problem are the ones who don't understand really what's being assessed. And so it's middle ground. To me, it struck a tone of mostly fairness toward the end, but they had to throw that headline out there because that's what it's 2015. That's what we do. Overall, the way assessments were presented, the way assessment companies were presented, and even the way some of the individuals who had been assessed and had grievances, for lack of a better word, the way it all came together in the article. Did you think it was mostly positive towards our industry, mostly negative towards our industry? I know I said I felt it was kind of even, but you have a deeper understanding of the product than I do. Was it even? Not against us? Pretty fair. Pretty fair?
Pretty fair when it came to bringing in some of the practices, and then Hogan's commentary on it, but you had to get there. You had to dig. And I think it was actually a pretty fair representation of what the perception. Yes, absolutely. The behind-the-scenes perception of candidates. Having gone through the job market process, I took a couple of years to find the right fit. And this was 4 years ago. And I graduated in 2010, right after the economic fallout, as we all know, especially for knowledge workers. And that was a very difficult time period. And everything that was mentioning, I had actually heard every bit of it before as an applicant, and then as a new hire, and then now as part of our consumer insight team is hearing the same sort of thing. It's these impressions. They're certainly not unfounded. It feels to the professional community there are some generational differences. There's no question about that among the emerging workforce and the mature workforce. But I would imagine that's the same kind of thing that's gone on for decades, if not hundreds of years, since the advent of compensated effort. So I would imagine. But there's no question that assessment developers as well as workforce support entities are looking at the generational differences, looking at generational perspectives. Okay, so you don't want to take a test. Would you imagine that 20, let's say even 30 years ago, a job applicant complaining about having to take a test? I think the overall general observation is that even a couple decades ago, it would have been unheard of to question, to some degree, an employer. And now there's a level of scrutiny. There's a level of skepticism in the best way, questioning practices, hiring practices, even in the face of, again, like unprecedented competition for jobs. There's still this accountability that the emerging workforce is holding hiring organizations. That's very interesting. They're making sure that hiring organizations are towing the line when it comes to fair, equitable hiring practices. Assessments are an easy target. And again, because of all the factors we listed today, they're an easy target to, I wouldn't say even unfairly malign or demonize. I would say it's almost fair, and it is I think the responsibility of assessment developers to communicate to some degree and try and address, if not try and quell some of the skepticism, some of the side eye.
Right. Yeah. But to your point, and I forget who mentioned it in here. It might have been the N4 fellow. I can't find it right away. Ray Dalio from the Bridgewater Associates hedge fund said that data can be the key to a true meritocracy free from the old boys network. There's also, sort of counter to the fear you just mentioned, which I know we don't hold here but is out there, the assessment really does throw your skin color, your sex, a lot of the things that would potentially be sticking points for someone trying to make like a legal case against an employer. It really does strip all that away, and it's not even looking at your background per se as much as it is who you are. Now, we all know that some of that might be able to be traced back to your background, your nurture, nature, whatever, but it doesn't set up that way. It doesn't set up like, where are you from? Oh, well, that's a poor part of town. Are you more, X, Y, or Z? Or you're a spoiled rich kid. Are you more X, Y, or Z? It just says, do you feel that? Do you find yourself doing that? And so I believe there's a lot more, I want to say honesty. I don't know if honesty is the proper term. I guess it can be subjective.
Raw information.
Yeah, raw data. It seems like a lot of the fears of racism, sexism, elitism, ageism, nepotism should be stripped away by this, not in any way embolden the people who might want to build a case on that, because there's absolutely nothing in these assessments, at least in ours, about black, white, man, woman. Yeah, black, white, man, woman, 70-30, So I think that would be something that I thought it would be, I guess I thought, given the current political climate, it might have been trumpeted more in the article. And it was touched on, and a lot of things were touched on, so I'm not saying it got short shrift, but it seems to be an equalizer, to his point, more so than
instead of it's astounding to me at times, and then again I'm starting to get used to it, the amount of time that we spend defending and explaining the ways that a responsibly developed assessment that is free of adverse impact or free of any kind of influence on the hiring decision based on perceived differences or even genetic differences in like race and all of that, okay, inside of the tracks that you come from. The amount of time that we have to explain the ways in which that does not introduce legal liability on the part of the hiring organizations, it's absolutely a valid question. But okay, so here's another part of the better communication on the part of assessment development companies, is that it, to your point, it can introduce a level of an equalizer. An absolute equalizer of objective information, and yet it can be, counterpoint to that is that it can be hard to think of your psychological traits as objective information. So that's kind of the hard balance that you strike between, okay, to an employer, the job match percent is an indicator of the degree to which you're going to likely fit this job. A very numerical, quantified, easily packaged, this is their likely job fit. And we think of that as in very objective terms. To the candidate, to the absolute end user of the assessment, that's my energy score. I'm a 4 on energy. That means I'm a bump on a log. So there are, everyone's, their sense of self, their sense of ego can be tied up into these numbers. And so, again, back to our point about communicating, that 4 is not bad. 8 is not good. It's just the approach you take to it. So that is a difficult balance.
Do you think that it wasn't until I realized, like I was given my results, the PXT results, and then I was able to, I had like the information packet about the PXT, I guess you could say more about the product and how it evaluates, I guess, the way you answer. And it wasn't until I was able to compare like the book with my results that I was able to understand that it's not necessarily a pass or fail test as one would say, applying for a job. So do you think that applicants might benefit from access to their results instead of as someone who's applied for jobs, you finish the test, you're like, okay, it's completed, so what are they so
that feedback.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, all right, so what did they get out of that? I could have been tired that day, or I could have been mad that day, so it's like, does that kind of fall into, like, has that been something you guys might have considered, giving access to the applicants, like
Sure.
access to the results, like a printout?
That's what we have. We have an individual report.
Yeah.
There's always the question in any implementation situation into a client organization in their hiring process, the degree to which the client organization wants to provide that kind of feedback. As an assessment developer, we have to err on the side of the client organization's preferences.
Right.
But I think there's no question overall in the emerging workforce that the need for immediate and in-depth feedback is huge.
Yeah, because that contributes to that insecurity, that vulnerability.
Yeah.
Because it just says, oh, someone will be in contact with you. Yeah. That's the end. You're like, but I don't even know what they got out of that.
The toughest part, I think the toughest part of any evaluation process in any area of life, but obviously workforce issues and hiring and placement issues of immediate concern is, what do they think? What do they think about me? I think that's, again, human nature. Yeah. So if client organizations, do you like me? I don't know where I stand. So the client organization, that's a high touch issue there. Yeah. There's a decision of how high or low touch do they want to be with their applicant pool. You can imagine a very high volume job for a low complexity role. Where there's 1,000 or 2,000 applicants. We've seen them in our organization. They wouldn't necessarily want that very high touch, However, if you have 3 applicants for a higher complexity role, you might want that level of interactivity that includes feedback from their assessment results and that sort of thing. So,
that makes sense.
That's definitely a variable.
Because you could think like, even just like that printout of like the 4, the 8, where they fall, not so much how the job match or where they fit on that's obviously for the employer, but for someone, a candidate, to look at themselves and be like, well, that's not how I thought I was, but this is interesting, because then they might think, oh, maybe I can improve on this. So it could almost help candidates improve themselves, to become better employees, I guess, if they wanted to take that initiative. But once again, that's not the
organization's role or responsibility. Now we'll zoom out to a larger sense. And again, back to Mark Allen's town hall just now and the objectives for FY16. From a Wiley perspective, and where WLS fits into that, is to create a skilled and responsible and productive workforce. And how we can do that is to give candidates, the assessment takers, that feedback, and where they stand. We've started a number of initiatives at Profiles, under the Profiles umbrella, that just for whatever reason, it didn't necessarily get off the ground, but we had good intentions. And one of those was to give the PXT in a career development setting. So it is to help candidates see where they may best fit in different roles. That is one of the nice applications. I mean, obviously, of a selection instrument, you could do that a priori before the hiring process starts to see where that assessment taker might fit in different industries, different roles, high complexity, low complexity, education level, college level, high school level. All right. So we started that, but it touches on one of the core objectives for Wiley moving forward. And that is the implementation and application of assessments as part of the entire career arc, from education to career search, career development, and then eventually to selection and development. And we know where profiles, the XT anyway, sits in that, obviously the selection arena. But the degree to which we can evolve the assessments that WLS as a combined integrated business unit can produce, to back it up a little bit toward candidate development, then that gets back into the professional development piece. And so it zooms out on an organizational level.
So you're saying, because we had that thought in marketing as well, it's kind of interesting that it comes up. You're saying, is that something Wiley is or would consider as maybe not for us? Maybe they, because I feel like they have us kind of not bracketed, but like we're the pre-hire thing. Would they consider taking that and making that another piece of their overall pie, like having that be the career development portion? Because we talked about that in marketing probably a year or so ago. We realized it kind of bypasses the partner in a way, because if you're going straight to the workforce, so I see how it could be touchy. But for someone who's, because there's tons of people out of work, for them to be able to take something simple, and we can't give it away, we're a business for heaven's sake, but for them to be able to take it at a reasonable price and say, okay, this is telling me that I'm going to be most fulfilled potentially in this sort of industry. Is that kind of is that the arena we're playing in somewhat? Like they take it coming out of high school or college or something like that?
That's what we're talking about right now in this room. I can't say necessarily, obviously, from a product development perspective, if that's in the pipeline necessarily, but it feels to me like it would be a next step, a good fit. And when we say us, we're now talking about WLS, remember. We're now talking about Inscape, Pfeiffer, Josie Bass, all the collection, Leadership Challenge, the collection of brands that make up WLS. And so if we're not talking about the XT proper, then we're talking about an integrated product line that brings together the strengths of all of those brands to address, again, that assessment piece of the career development arc.
And you're giving individuals a vernacular to be able to speak to companies that are using those products, because they may come along and say, well, I've taken StrengthsFinder, which is a decent product, but it doesn't match up with, maybe, for example, it doesn't maybe match up with Hogan or People Answers or us. But they would still have to come in and take our stuff. Well, if they come, hat in hand and are like, I took your everything disc /PXT / whatever, and here's how I did. It says I'm a decent fit for your company. Obviously, there probably have to still be some sort of confirmation of results and stuff like that. But they can then, more or less walk into a situation and not just have your basic job interview form, but they can say, oh, an FYI, I took your WLS thing and I did this, so I know your job. This is down the road. This is the level of complexity and specificity that we haven't hit. But, this says I'm good for the job.
I could narrow down that, all the stack of applications of people who might think, oh, I think I would probably be a good manager, or I think I'd be a really good product developer, whereas that's maybe what they would like to be, but their capabilities and their drive is.
Well, how much do people now talk about, if they've taken the disc, just take all the other discs out of the equation for a minute, just the Wiley version, People come up to each other and go, oh, I'm a C, and I'm a D. And you automatically have a frame of reference for exactly what they're talking about. Oh, I'm an I, I'm an IC. And if somebody's able to walk up and for us, it'd be like, oh, well, I'm a PXT A1. And you know exactly what that means. And oh, well, then you'd be a great manager and we'll consider you in our pipeline. I know that's in the arena of what we're talking about, but obviously way down the road. But that's what we were talking about in marketing. We sell, through partners to companies, and clearly there's thousands and millions of people in the corporate workforce in America, so there's money to be made there. There's also millions of people not in the corporate workforce that are kind of out of our purview to sell to. So from a strictly marketing / sales perspective, it's we don't have anything to do with these 30 million out of work people, because they're not being assessed unless they're in the pipeline somewhere else. But, individually, could they afford, if it was $99, would they want to afford it? I don't know. That's a question above my pay grade.
It's a different value chain than our indirect business model is right now for WLS. However, it sure feels like at a Wiley organizational level. where the learner is the end point of the value chain. I don't know the degree to which WLS would move toward that. However, it makes some sense as to our piece in the puzzle of the development arc, to where the assessment results become an asset for the candidate and not something to their detriment.
Yes,
And
exactly.
back to
Not
the,
a threat. It's an asset.
Back to the marketing push of trying to explain not just to HR personnel but to individuals how this is for your good.
Yeah.
You know.
Exactly.
And it's
To
totally up to
change
you.
that perception
Yeah.
of the person who's taking the assessment, the candidate, I guess you could say. Because like as a student, it would be so cool to know, like, you know, when you take that test, like in elementary school, it's like, oh, you'd be a great welder, or I'm going to be a bricklayer. Do you guys? I don't even know if you still do that or not. Well, it's like in college, it's almost great because I've changed my major 4 times. I'm going to my senior year as like an 8th year senior. That like I don't know where my strengths are. I know that, you know, interning here has really helped. Help me identify a few things. But it'd be really cool to know, like as a student, investing in my education, if my major or, you know, what I thought, you know, I wanted to do is what I'm actually good at, or would my strengths or my qualities match that. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So
it's that job fit, that job match piece. It's not only the X factor that the individual possesses. It's not only their approach that they're likely to take, but it's the fit, and that's squarely where the XT is you're not going to be good or bad at your job. You're not likely to be a high or low performer. You're likely to take this type of approach, and it's not a threat, and it can be really hard to communicate that.
Yeah.
So, but it sounds like there's many different facets to this discussion. There's the candidate themselves. There's the client organization to which we are convincing of positive outcomes based on implementing the assessment. It's
the way that they implement it, then
communicating the way they implement it, right, in a responsible fashion. Oh yeah, it's a very multifaceted discussion that assessment developers have to be able to come to the table and contribute to. In a way that's from a position of understanding of their customers, understanding the concerns and challenges that our customers face, not only on the candidate level but the client organization level. And if we can come to the table and convey that we understand and are taking steps to address that, and in not a way that's lip service or that is a sales push, in a way that's real and authentic, I think authenticity, immediate feedback, transparency, they can be more than buzzwords. They can actually be put into practice as we work with our client organizations. And at least behind the scenes in the technology group, in the research and product development groups, it's something that we are living every day.
Yeah. It's like one of the questions where it's like, how do we, you know, face the customer and face the industry as like one, you know, and how he was like, you know, how do we improve like cohesiveness, I guess you could, or cohesive, you know, it's to be open and well coordinated. So it's like it starts from, you know, R&D, and then it goes down to, you know, sales, and then it just goes down the chain to our customer, whoever that company is. They also have to be in line with how, you know, it should be presented, that it should be all like one way to, in a way, you know, we can offer you this, but you need to make sure that you present it, I guess, so much. Like hold them accountable at the very end of the line to educate the candidates, you know, of the results of the test, and that they're not just sitting down. Like I've, you know, working as like a server, I took something that resembled an SAT, and I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, you know, in a way, it's like such a low level job, but I was like, why did I have to spend like an hour filling in these bubbles for, you know, can I hold a tray? Can I speak to people? Can I multitask? I guess, you know, but it just seems like so extreme in certain cases. But of course, on like a more corporate level, it seems to be more beneficial.
Yeah.
But
especially as we serve a wide breadth of organizations that may employ what would be perceived as a lower complexity position, like server. And even though the perceived relevance of it, I mean, we could address that. But sometimes it's worth keeping in mind that there's always more to the story. And it may not even be that they're looking for a certain job percent match. It may be the case that they want someone who is invested enough to apply for the job, that is willing to sit down for an hour and take the exam, or they're willing to sit down and take it.
Yeah, speaks to your ability to finish stuff, see stuff through, attention span.
Yeah.
All those things that may not show up, one-to-one. How many people today are still just sitting across the table from someone, sight unseen, have no idea about what kind of worker they are, and saying, well, I need somebody. You're breathing air. I'll take you.
Anecdotally, all the time. And they may be only looking to, in the organizations that I know Profiles has typically served, are not necessarily the ones that are looking for someone for 3 months or 6 months. They are looking to increase tenure and to improve those kind of positive outcomes. And sometimes it's, these, and I've heard anecdotally in some organizations, it is the fact that these people took the PXT. Fine, you're hired. And they just quit in the middle of it. So behaviorally, it sometimes it may not even be about the content of itself. It could be about the process and the commitment of the person to see that process through. Yeah. And so assessments can be a huge part of that, because it's more in-depth knowledge of the candidate over and above, okay, I checked the box.
Right.
I checked the assessment box. I checked the resume box. Okay, now let's deep dive. Yeah. And it is definitely going to be a challenge to convey not only the organizations but also the candidates that this can be a real asset where everyone wins and everyone has a chance to shine to each other, because it's really an interview toward the candidate as well. That if the candidate feels like they're a good fit for the organization, well, if right off the bat they're having to take a 500-question test that is full of algebra formulas for a certain job that would not require that ever, again, it's part of critical thinking skills. It's not that you know how to use algebraic formulas. It's the fact that you're willing to do it, or that you're willing to take the time to do that as a team player in your first, assignment, kind of coming full circle, in your first assignment by your prospective employer.
Yeah,
maybe.
There's a lot of ways.
Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to add? I know we're taking an hour of your time, so
it's perfect. No, I think it's a very interesting article that fairly and reasonably sums up not only what we have experienced, I know in product development, have heard and experienced and ourselves, and presents, kind of, I think if WLS, our marketing team, if we can kind of start to get the word out about, and to your point, not in rebuttal and not in debate, but just coming to the table and starting this discussion. It's easy to talk about high level, ideas in abstraction, but how are we on the ground, behind the scenes, as an assessment developer, putting into practice, being transparent, making the test efficient, increasing the perceived relevance, so that it supports not only the client's personal brand in an unfiltered way, but it supports the organization's brand in a positive light to an increasingly competitive talent pool.
Like this probably could be a good example of a way for R&D to improve, certain concerns if we've missed some of them or something, but then also for marketing and for sales, and for other people to look at this as a way that, wow, we haven't done a very good job of demonstrating out what our strengths are and what R&D has done to improve these perceptions. So maybe it's it might be another department's weakness, that they're like, oh, here's a place for improvement, that clearly we're not getting our point across, or educating everyone on the perks of this and how it has evolved, I guess, in a way. like a weapon and something for us to benefit from, to learn from in all aspects
more
of the
public
company.
resource.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. So the entire company, as we start to integrate these departments,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, off the record, we know that you guys wouldn't have even been in this building,
Yeah.
a year ago.
Yeah, that's true.
So the point is that we can have more internal resources. We can do certifications, boot
Right.
camps, that sort of thing. But to have you guys as even more, the most external and public-facing vehicle
Mm-hmm.
for getting the word out about how the work we're doing is not lip service. We're actually putting it on the ground. It's a good thing.
It is.
Yeah.
I think too, again, when we put this together and we conceived it as a blog post, it might have another life once we get into all this and break out all these little nuggets.
Yep.
But I think it could be also something where because Wiley is so partner-centric, that we take this information, we kind of coalesce this interview and the timepiece, and we make it available to partners. Again, not to defend, because there's nothing in there that we really need to defend against, as much as it is, this is what the world is seeing. For people who don't live in the HR world or live in, Wall Street and see, Fortune 500 companies and their HR departments and how they hire and fire people, whatever, they don't know anything about this. So this timepiece really could be, in a lot of ways, the greater world's introduction to even what this is.
Yeah, true.
Because it's not like USA Today has an HR section. It's not like CNN has Today in HR News. So for people who read, for people who stay up on the news, this might be their first introduction. I mean, they might know of it, tertiary wise, but they've never been confronted with what it means. And it'd be I think we saw it as an opportunity to speak to just what assessments are, how they work, and how companies are using them, and our vision for what they should and could be, versus someone taking that in a negative, like someone who might identify with the single mother who's like, I want to take a test. Well, that's not the point. That's not the point of assessments. It's not the point of what we do. And there's a big silver lining to the cloud she saw that they didn't get around to telling that story. So to me, again, not in defense, but just clarification and educating.
Too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like an opportunity for us to stand up and be like, oh my gosh, we're so sorry that we haven't, that it's not clear.
Well, not only that, I wouldn't even necessarily go there as much as I would just be like in an excited way, like the world's finally talking about assessments. Let us tell you what they are.
Exactly.
And there was some stuff in there that might freak you out, but trust me, those are individual cases and not the way most people view these things. So even if, not to bury the lead, but if I was writing an article, it'd be, they're finally talking about assessments. This is what they said. We're so excited to be part of this conversation, and we're so good at what we do, and you guys know us and love us. And then if there's anything apologetic in it at all, I'd be like, if they did mention, this would be to me about like 10 paragraphs in. They did mention that some people freak out. Well, they don't have to, and here's why. And just give it that, not spin, but
well, not like an apology,
give it that.
But like we may not have presented you with enough information. Maybe on our part, we haven't educated the public about these things. We've worked so hard internally to create this awesome product, but maybe it's now our chance to educate. Like maybe now our focus can be to, like another part of the team, to educate on a broader scale, I guess you could say, so that could acknowledge.
I like it. Well, thank you so much. I didn't know we were going to take this long. I really hope I don't delete the audio right now. It says pop.